guys, welcome back to Gryphon Studio. My name's Alan, and this week I've been working on some kind of like Halloween autumnal themed stuff for the holidays, festivals, kind of festive season and stuff. And a while ago I got these little kind of sentient pumpkins. Can I focus? There we go, professional. Look at that. These little sentient pumpkins from Goblin's Workshop, and they're kind of like very low level monsters, but I like them because they're just interesting, and who doesn't love a good like kind of weird encounter where these seemingly inanimate objects just come to life. These things are called Mawkin. You can find them on the Goblin's Workshop website. I'll stick a link down below. I really like them, and I just thought I'd make some kind of interesting festive Halloween style piece of terrain. So I'm going to work on a little bit of a farmer's field, which you can see behind me there. It's a little piece of scattered terrain, and hopefully should be pretty useful for a few different kind of things for this holiday season. Right, let's just crack on with the build. Let's get going.
Alright, so to start off with, I'm going to use a piece of Formex, or expanded PVC, as it's sometimes called. This is about 3mm thick, but you can get it kind of 3 and 5mm thick, and I'm going to kind of poke some holes in a kind of a vague square shape to kind of take these fence posts that are going to be made out of matchsticks. And it's just really simple basic matchsticks that you'd find from a craft store. I'm going to trim them down about half size of a matchstick, ready for fence posts. And I'm going to glue those in with a little bit of acrylic glue. I got this just from like the pound shop or something, like just everything's like quite cheap, and it just seemed like a really useful glue to use, and it does stick most things together pretty well. So I'm going to use it on these, and probably in quite a lot in this build as well, actually, on different things. So we'll see how it goes. And next up is the sculptor mold. This is fast becoming one of my favourite modelling materials for natural builds. It's very useful for creating these sort of natural undulations in the groundwork, creating these kind of like peaks and troughs in the furrows here. I've only got room for about 4 of these kind of furrows that they're going to take crops and things, but that should be enough just to get the idea across. The idea here is that you just kind of put it down really quite wet, but it does dry very quickly after about sort of maybe 5 minutes or so, and then you have to kind of really smooth it out with your fingers to try and get a nice finish on it. And it does kind of go off and cure quite, I would say it cures maybe 50% very quickly, and then the rest of the curing takes place over, I don't know, maybe the next couple of hours. So yeah, you work fairly quickly with it at first, and then you can leave it for a while. Now I had an idea to kind of like half destroy some of this fence just to give it a little bit more character. So I kind of plucked out a few of these fence posts here, and I started to lay a little bit of glue down. Again, just going to use this acrylic glue that I got from the cheap craft store, and then I'm going to add some little foam bricks. These have been pre-made on an earlier video where I was using these kind of little tiny bricks just to build up some terrain. So I'm going to use these to make a little wall, and then hopefully they'll kind of add a little bit extra character to the kind of the perimeter of this field, and hopefully add an extra dimension of interest. Alright, so with that partial wall sort of completed, I'm going to move on to some cross members for the fence, and I'm just going to use some wood glue and some matchsticks to make these. And I mean, wood glue should be fairly tacky, and it should grab kind of instantly, more or less, but you might need to leave it for a few minutes at least, or maybe an hour or so after it's all been assembled. Now I do like to dive into my bits box occasionally and use up some of the stuff that I've acquired over the years. So I found this little kind of wagon wheel, cut the bottom off and just placed it around the side of the fence. And then it was time to move on to the Mod Podge and black paint phase. Just where the foam is exposed there on the wall, the rest of it is perfectly fine to just be painted. and glued. This here is a bit of PVA glue just going on over the base of it. I'm just going to smear this out and then apply a little bit of a sandy texture, and that should help sell the kind of the groundwork a little bit better. And there's nothing fancy about this sand, it is just sand, and but it really helps, you know, sell that kind of groundwork texture. It's a good analog for that kind of muddy texture. And then I'm just going to dry brush pretty much the whole thing, excluding the walls, with this kind of tan or ivory sort of colour. And it's just going to go over all of the base, the mud, the dirt, the fence, and the kind of, you know, the wagon wheel and stuff like that. And because I like to vary my stone up a little bit, I just painted out a few bricks in a few different colours here. Just some, like, you know, tans, beiges, ivories, browns and whatnot. Mostly warm colours that you find in stone. And you get this kind of patchwork effect at first, but once you dry brush it with a bit of a light grey, like I'm going to do here, it will kind of tone all those down and really help kind of blend them all together in a very nice, interesting stone-like texture. And once that is completely dry, then you can move on to the washing stage. So this is going to be my usual black-brown wash over the whole build, all the walls and all of the. Oop, didn't need that. Get rid of that. You saw nothing. Just over all of the fences and the wagon wheel and stuff, but not over the dirt. I wanted to keep that fairly light and have a decent contrast between the wall and the floor. But if all goes well, it should tone down the kind of brightness of the wall and also get into all those little nooks and crannies and pick out all the extra detail. So I'm going to add a little bit of a detail here to the outside of the field, and it's just like a little haystack. So I put down a blob of wood glue, and then I just kind of plonked on some hay, which is just kind of dead grass static flock, and just in a kind of a big mound of it, and I just wanted to see if that would work. This is really a bit experimental, but this is on a non-stick surface, so if you're going to try this, then make sure you use some baking parchment or some Teflon coated something, just to make sure you can get this thing off there. Once that was almost dry, I added a little bit of scenic cement with a pipette, just sort of help that kind of all those little fibers stick together. And then once I believed they were dry, I just prized them off with a scraper, using my 3D printer scraper there. And they weren't dry, of course. They were they were still a little bit damp underneath, and I had to let them air off for a little bit upside down. But they worked pretty well. I was left with this, and you know, once it was dry, it was actually quite cool. You don't have to stick it down, of course, but I did. I wanted this to be, you know, pretty solid and self-contained. And then I started going on to the clump foliage phase, where I use a bit of no-nails glue and just put it down in some patches on the floor around the edges of this farm, and just stuck down that clump foliage. I think Woodland Scenic's clump foliage just go pretty far. I mean, I haven't run out in God knows how long. It's lasted me a very long time. And for a little bit of a kind of vegetation variation, I'm going to add some of these little self-adhesive grass tufts, and they're sort of like they're like grass, but they're kind of almost like plants as well. They've got like little bits of flock on top of the static flock, I guess, and they look pretty cool. But that's the next stage done. And then while that was all drying, I wanted to make a small scarecrow, so I started off by making this little matchstick cross here. and then I used some of the sculptor mold from earlier just to kind of like bulk out its body. I really didn't need to bulk out the arms, it was really just the kind of I say shoulders to kind of torso area, and that was enough to give the vague impression that it's kind of bulked out. Now, I was debating on what to do for a scarecrow's head, but I thought I think I should do like a pumpkin, jack-o'-lantern type style, so I got a bit of green stuff and just kind of molded it into the shape of a pumpkin, I suppose, like just a big ball, and then stuck that on top of the main body of the scarecrow there, and then took some sculpting tools. These are like silicone sculpting tools, so they don't stick to anything. And I just sort of started carving in some of these little lines to create that effect of a pumpkin, and then once I was done with that, I was able to move on to the eyes and the mouth to give it a bit of a face. At first I was going to use maybe like a sack of something as its head, you know, maybe like add some buttons for its eyes or something, but I thought with it being Halloween season, I thought a pumpkin could be kind of cool, and also it matches the Mawkins that are, you know, essentially the reason I made this little farm. I also then took a little bit of pillowcase, an old pillowcase, and just kind of cut out a small piece of material and essentially just wrapped it around the guy, and then cut away these straggly little bits of material. He does also have a few little brush bristles there as arms, but they were kind of more or less irrelevant, as later on I added a little bit more of the dead grass static flock around his hands and his neck area to act like straw sticking out. You'll see soon towards the end of the video. And then after priming him brown, I added a little bit of orange for the pumpkin there on top, and gave the whole thing a nice Agrax Earth shade wash. Of course, you can just use normal kind of black-brown wash. It doesn't have to be anything clean. It just has to be, you know, kind of grimy looking, I reckon. And then with the field more or less done, I decided I could add this little guy in, but I didn't want to put him in the middle. I thought maybe he'd probably get knocked over, he wouldn't be sturdy enough, so I thought maybe the fence might be better support for him, and I could maybe hide the base underneath some of the hay that's against the fence there. So I went and put him and stuck him down just over there near the fence. Then I started adding a little bit of kind of moss to the walls and the fence area. This is just a bit of yellow woodland scenic's fine turf, and I find this is really cool for kind of giving stones that are very aged, weathered look. Sometimes I often use green, but on this occasion I just thought the moss is losing its colour, it's getting into kind of autumn, and you can add a little bit of orange to these spots as well, because you do get this kind of interesting orange texture. I don't know what it is, I'm assuming it's some sort of like lichen styled moss that tends to cover stonework a lot in these kind of climates that I live in. Now I also have a couple of barrels and sacks of vegetables and things lying around. I got these from Angry Stag Wargaming, and they make some really cool bits of scatter terrain just to kind of dress up your scenery a little bit with a little bit of character. So once they were stuck down, I moved on to adding a little bit of grass to the piece. This is just to fill in the areas around the field and make it look a bit less barren, I would say. So I transferred it over to the tray, took out some of the Citadel, I think it's called dry grass, and just kind of put it on in pretty big clumps. And there's nowhere on this earth I will ever waste flock, so I tapped it off into the tray so I could gather it up and use it for later. Then it's time to move on to the leaves around the edges. I was going for obviously an autumnal vibe here, and so I thought, you know, adding some of these kind of dried, scattered leaves around the place, around the edges, would be a nice touch. So this is just a basic kind of birch seed leaves. This is quite a common material that modelers use because they're just the perfect shape. They're just ideal for this kind of these fall leaves. And with that done, we have a final result.
There we are, guys, all finished. I'm really pleased with the way it turned out. I could have put some interesting sort of crops, plant life kind of thing along these furrows in the farmer's field here, but I wanted the area to be a lot more playable, and often terrain can kind of get in the way of itself, so I decided to leave these relatively unhindered. Of course, you can change that up if you want to. You can, I mean, it's only made of sculptor mold. I could put some in at a later date if I really wanted to. I could just poke a hole in and stick a few bits of sort of plant life in there. But yeah, I really like the way this kind of turned out, and thank you, a massive thank you to the Goblins Workshop for kind of essentially sponsoring this video with its models. That really inspired me to make this kind of interesting build, and yeah, I'm really pleased with the way it turned out. And if you did enjoy this video, please feel free to hit the like button below and comment as well. I'll try and get back to everybody. And also subscribe if you haven't already. It's a really big help. Also, really hit the little bell button and you'll get notified of any future videos that I post. And if you're on Instagram, feel free to check me out on there. I post occasional things from around the workshop, interesting builds that I'm working on, and models that I'm painting and things like that. It's mostly Warhammer, D&D kind of stuff. So feel free to check that out. I am also on Patreon as well, if you'd like to check me out on there. Thank you very much to all of my existing patrons, you beautiful people who keep me moving and keep this channel going, and effectively funding and sponsoring every one of my videos. I couldn't do this without you, and I really, really, really appreciate it. So thank you very much, you guys. And any new patrons that sign up in the future, thank you very much to you. That's it for this one. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for stopping by, and happy crafting.